Hello, I'm Zetta Thomelin. I'm here today with Lily Lai, one of our new trustees. Hi, Lily.
Hi, Zetta.
Thank you for talking to me today. I wonder if you'd like to tell me a bit about some research you're involved with at the moment.
So my background is as an acupuncturist and as a Chinese herbal medicine practitioner. I got into research within a few years of qualifying, and then essentially was interested in looking more into the evidence base around
Yes.
gynecological issues that I was seeing a lot in clinical practice. So that led me to eventually apply for a PhD with the University of Southampton and studying under the late Professor George Lewis and Andrew
Oh,
Flower.
yes. Yeah.
So I was really fortunate to get NIHR funding for that PhD fellowship. So what ensued really from there was a real love of mixing clinical experience
Yeah.
alongside these really rigorous training standards in research that we should expect essentially.
Mm.
And I really enjoyed that kind of marrying up of those two worlds, like wearing your practitioner hat
Yes.
at times and then combining that with your research hat. So essentially, for 5 years of my research work, that was predominantly on polycystic ovary syndrome and looking at seeing how Chinese herbal medicines can help women living with this condition who were experiencing irregular or absent periods.
Yeah.
So, what kind of followed on from that really was further work into exploring how we can modify certain herbal formulations
Yeah.
to see how it can be potentially offered within NHS, within primary care in
Yeah.
particular,
Yeah.
as one of the ways that we can offer women help for regulating periods. Not everyone is suitable for some of the common medical options that are recommended.
Yeah.
Some of them experience a lot of side effects, and for some women, they are wanting to explore alternatives essentially to
Yeah.
see how their bodies may respond to something that feels more suitable for what they're looking for right now.
Yes, well, I think people are generally looking beyond the pharmaceutical now, aren't they? Or, wanting different alternatives, and it's finding the evidence that can lead people on the right paths, isn't it?
It
Yeah.
is, and I think for me, a lot of it is, culturally, contextually, obviously, modalities like acupuncture, Chinese herbal medicine, a lot of the evidence base is in China. It's on East
Oh, of
Asian
course. Yeah, yeah,
populations.
yeah,
So for
yeah,
me, and even though I was seeing benefits within patients in clinical practice when I started working, I think for me, it was about actually what is the evidence base? What does it look like here
yeah,
when we,
yeah,
carry it out on people who haven't grown up with acupuncture or
yeah,
herbs around them in their lives? Is the experience any different, essentially? And I think for me, that was a real challenge, but a really interesting one in order to be able to look about how we could get relevant evidence that could be applicable for both the local population here in the UK, but
yes.
also for important projects like NICE guidelines, for example.
Yeah, I mean that's vital, isn't it? But that's just such an interesting idea to think about. If you're not being brought up with an awareness and an acceptance of a particular modality, how does that influence your response to it when you have it? That's a really interesting concept. I find that
Mm.
fascinating. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't think, I think in the initial early stages of building evidence and looking at evidence, I think most people who don't work in research, the idea is that you look at clinical trials as their
Yeah.
essentially the gold standard. And that's what, as a member of public, you're essentially reading a lot about.
Yes.
But when you delve into academia, as you know,
Yeah.
essentially there's such a spectrum of research designs,
Yes.
methodologies
Yeah.
that is relevant to the kind of knowledge that we're looking to obtain. And
Yes.
I think for me, it really opened my mind up in terms of understanding how evidence, first of all, is generated, but
Yeah.
also what's important for the patient in front of you and for the clinician that has to make these kinds of recommendations to their patients day in and day out as well.
Yes. Yeah. Did you have you found much of a difference in response
In terms of
in terms of local population as opposed to in relation to the some of the research? Have you done any kind of cross comparisons or
Not necessarily cross comparisons, but
yeah,
the basis of my PhD essentially in formulating, I guess, a kind of a research protocol or a
yeah,
design for a trial for my PhD,
yeah,
which was carried out in this country.
yeah,
Essentially, I had to look at evidence that was already published on
yeah,
Chinese herbs for
yeah,
PCOS,
yeah,
and all of that at that time was carried out in China.
yeah,
So it was about transposing a lot of that research
yeah,
into here in the UK.
yeah,
And I think probably the best part of the whole PhD essentially was being able to have these very in-depth conversations with different stakeholders. So
yeah,
for me, it was
yeah,
about presenting that evidence published in Chinese
yes, yeah,
um, from RCTs carried out in China, but then putting that forwards to practitioners in the UK, very experienced
yeah,
practitioners, and being able to say, how does this compare with what you see in
yeah,
clinical practice?
yes. And it is that, isn't it? It's that day in, day out clinical practice, what's being reflected.
Yeah, exactly. And
And
I think there are differences in the
yeah,
way that it's practiced in
yeah,
China versus in this particular country.
yeah,
And essentially, the challenge for me within my project was to be able to say, this is how best practice in the UK
yeah,
looks like,
yeah,
and being able to start formulating a kind of, good practice guidelines, essentially.
yeah.
And that was
That's
really exciting.
really helpful, I would say, as well.
Really,
Yeah, yeah,
really helpful, but also when you start scratching the surface with research, as you
yeah,
probably know,
yeah.
you kind of realize just how little we do understand.
Yes,
And I think
yeah,
how much more there is to learn and understand.
yes.
So a very humbling experience for
And
sure.
how much the individual influences that outcome, what might have happened to them in that day. It's so difficult, isn't it, to be absolutely precise on these things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is where we can start to understand the value of things like objective outcome measures, where
Yes. Yeah.
it's thought that things like people's behaviors, their
Yeah.
perceptions may influence it less
Yeah.
compared to what we call subjective outcome measures,
Yeah.
where you can be influenced by how
Yeah.
you feel on the day
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you wake up and have that measurement taken. But we're starting to understand a lot more about how those different ways of measuring and assessing the treatment effect, how that can interplay. And it's always interesting to try to put together those jigsaw
Yeah.
puzzles
Yeah.
when you're reading research.
Yes. Well, that's really exciting to hear about, Lily, and I think yes, we're so excited to have you as a part of RCCM now. So I look forward to working with you as you
Thank
move forward
you.
with your projects.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being part of the team. So thank you very much for the warm welcome.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for talking to me today, Lily.
Thank
Okay,
you, Zetta.
bye bye.
Bye bye.